In this lecture, I will explain the OSPF LSA types 4 and 5, which are generated by the ASPR when we configure redistribution between another protocol and OSPF. So we will redistribute EIGRP here into OSPF. So if I go now to the router number 6 and then configure router EIGRP 10 and then network 192.168.100.1 and then 4 zeros, and then I will redistribute this network into OSPF. So router OSPF 1, and then I will redistribute EIGRP 10 into OSPF, and we see that only classful networks will be redistributed because we do not use the subnet keyword that I will explain about later. So now if I go to router 1 and then issue the command do show IP OSPF database, here we see that we have the summary ASPR link state LSA and also the type 5 external link state LSA. So the summary ASP or the type 4 is generated by the ABR, which is here 4.1, which is router 4 in the topology, and it tells us about the ASPR. So type 4 is generated by the ASPR, by the ABR, and it tells us about how to reach the ASPR, which is here the 100.1 router, which is this router 6, which is the ASPR, the router that is doing the redistribution. So if we go now to router 1 and try to see the details of this LSA, so show IP OSPF database and then ASPR summary and then the link ID of the ASPR, we see that the advertising router is router 4, the ABR, and it tells us how to reach the ASPR router, and it says that the metric to reach the ASPR is 2. So router 4 is the cost from router 4 to reach router 6, which is the ASPR, is 2 because we have 2 networks between the 2 routers. Now for the type 5, type 5 is generated by the ASPR router, so router 6 here, and it tells us about the external network, which is the 100 network. So again, type 5 is generated by the ASPR router, and it tells us how to reach the external network. Now if we want to check the details of type 5, we can use the keyword external here and then the ID of the external network, and here we see that the advertising router is the ASPR, and it tells us about the external network, and the cost to reach this external network is by default 20, and the metric type is 2, so external 2, and we will explain later about the metric and metric types. Now if we issue the command show IP route OSPF, we see the external route here to reach the external network, and we see that the metric is 20 and the metric type is external 2, and when we are using external 2 metric, then the original metric that is advertised by the ASPR stays the same, so it does not change along the path. So for example, if I go to router, maybe router 2, and issue the command do show IP OSPF, show IP route OSPF, you will see that the metric for reaching the external network is the same. It's 24 on all routers, so external 2 metric is does not change along the path, and I will explain more later about this type of metric. Now also on router 1 we see the OIA routes and the O only routes. So the OIA routes are the routes coming from outside the area. They are the inter area routes that are coming using the LSA type 3 from the ABR. And here we see the networks 4.0 and 7.0 as OIA routes, and we see that the metric is 67 and 68, and this is because router 4, which is the ABR, is advertising 4.0 network, as we have seen before, with the metric of 1, and the metric to reach the 3.0 network, which is the network of router 4, is 66. So 66 plus 1 will be 67, and for the 7.0 network, the ABR is advertising it with the metric of 2, so 66 plus 2 will be 68. And for the O only routes, they are the routes that are from the same area, so that they are the routes that are generated or received using the LSA type 1 and type